The first Mars mission from Europe is in trouble as a rival crew has disappeared, a cryptic warning unnerves them, and a mysterious survivor from the past appears. The Soviet spacecraft Soyuz, with Kosmina Vladimir Komarov on board, landed on Earth in 1967 after completing their mission. Perished many years later under the leadership of the Swedish billionaire, Meyer, says an expedition to Mars is being made. After 10 months, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses reaches the Red Planet. The captain informs the team that they have received permission to land, and asks the ship's AI, named Irene, to verify everything required for a soft landing. At this time, Meyer reveals that he spent 4 years preparing for this journey, sacrificing almost all his money for it. However, the American company, Zillion, beat them to it by landing. 2 weeks prior, Earth's issue is that there has been a given. There to report from the US crew, they only received a video where he said that you don't come to Mars. There's a disagreement among the personnel, and the captain says that the landing will take place regardless, and people disperse to their cabins. With 30 minutes left until landing, AI Irene begins preparations. However, an unforeseen event occurs. The ship does not detach from the carrier system, posing a threat to the entire crew. The only way out is to perform the separation manually. The commander ventures into space and struggles to free the attachments, but at that moment, the shuttle enters Mars's atmosphere. Throwing the captain into open space, the shuttle almost crashes onto Mars as a system error causes a power outage now. Their only option is a manual landing. Even after AI Irene enters sleep mode, the astronauts are able to land on Mars. They succeed, but their fuel is depleted, and Irene does not restart. Without the onboard computer and life support system, they had only a day to survive. Had Alessandra mourns her deceased husband, see a figure in space through the window after diagnosing the ship. It becomes apparent that too much fuel was consumed during the landing, and now the ship cannot return to orbit. The only option is to wait for the solar panels to power the generators, but there's a storm on the surface, and it will take 2 days. They don't have it at this point. Simon mentions the American ship Zeta-1, which beat them by 2 weeks. It likely crashed, but there are probably batteries left. The rover sets out on a journey while those remaining on the ship try to restart. The system engineer, Basil, recalls that AI has an energy-saving function. He initiates a reboot, but Irene doesn't start. At this time, the rover finds the wreckage of the American spacecraft, and one surviving solar panel, but there is no sign of the American crew. The astronauts head back but spot an unconscious person, in a spacesuit despite their ship running low on oxygen. Gene insists on transporting the person. Nearby, they find the black box from the American spacecraft. The team arrives at the ship, but Jan refuses to let them inside, stating that 4 survivors are better than 8 corpses, so he won't open the door. Alexandra tries to persuade the man when he discovers the astronaut wakes up, and at that moment, AI Irene activates and opens the doors upon examination. The found astronaut knows nothing about the American crew, as he is Vladimir Komarov, a Soviet cosmonaut born in 1927 in Moscow, carrying out the orders of the USSR government. He doesn't know how he ended up there, but he is not willing to reveal any secrets. Komarov confidently answers questions that are consistent with his time, raising the suspicion that he may have post-traumatic stress disorder. Astronauts send a message to Earth and receive a response from the American corporation, Zillion, stating that there were no Russians on their mission. The crew of the Ulysses spaceship try to make sense of the situation. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, end up on Mars? After all these years, whether he is a traveler or an extraterrestrial, the psychologist is tasked with questioning Komarov first, and he confesses that he is hungry. Gene goes to get food while the others try to understand what has actually happened. Basil suggests the idea that Komarov was waiting for them, while Vladimir is eating the food brought by Gene. When the woman confesses that he died at the age of 50 years, and his family buried him long ago, Komarov takes this news rather calmly. In the meantime, the state of the ship has reached stability. It remains unreliable because the engines do not work, and there is no fuel, so leaving is impossible. But the crew continues to keep an eye on Komarov, but he behaves calmly until he suddenly disappears. Simon searches the ship, but it yields no results. That's when people discover that his spacesuit is missing a part of it, for the crew following the heat trail. Irene, the group led by Simon, leaves. The rover continues on foot when Alexandra reports that Komarov's DNA analysis showed the presence of a third strand. He is not human, and then they catch up with Komarov, who leads them to an unfamiliar structure with a small stone pyramid on it, and tells Gene that Mars has been waiting for them for a very long time, at the same time as Goldstein. He of the Zillion Corporation, whose ship was the first to arrive at Mars. Informed about the discovery of a person on the Red Planet, who couldn't have gotten there naturally, suggesting that he was created on site, but only AI could survive for such a long time on a hostile planet for humans. This implies the need for further study. Komarov cannot explain how he opened the door, and found himself in the location where they discovered him. AI Irene conducts an analysis of the structure and determines that it is identical to Earth structures from ancient civilizations. It means that someone was inspired by human civilization, or humans borrowed these elements from extraterrestrials. The ship's crew increasingly ponder whether they will be able to return home, when they notice the landing of Goldstein's second ship. Soon, the captain of the ship, Gemma, establishes contact and promises to help them return to Earth. However, Meyer does not trust Goldstein and advises him to hide Komarov from competitors. Jean brings Komarov a uniform so that he does not stand out when the visitors arrive, and he requests that they trust him shortly. Two armed military personnel, Edward and Adam, arrive at their ship and behave rather aggressively. Edward demands that they hand over the black box from Zeta 1. The ship, not hearing an agreement, orders his partner to search for the ship. Meyer hands over the found black box, and they depart. Meanwhile, chemist Eva reports that the stone found on Mars consists of an alloy that does not exist on Earth. However, it is known from ancient sources, and was once called orichalcum, the metal of Atlantis. In addition to copper and zinc, nickel and iron, it contains a third strand of DNA similar to Komarov, warning that if Goldstein learns about this, he will take Kasmina back, and the crew is divided into those willing to exchange him for fuel, and those who are willing to stay but want to know the truth. Jean invites Vladimir into her cabin and asks for permission to use hypnosis. He agrees, and the psychologist begins his work with him. The rest of the crew listens to the conversation via transmission. However, Komarov only shares the final moments on the Sawyer spacecraft before its demise. During this time, Gemma and Alan arrive on the ship and apologize for the actions of the military, and express their readiness to help and fix all the mess. Jean remembers her conversation with Komarov, who laments the future of Earth due to humanity's irresponsible behavior in the meantime. It is revealed that the billionaire Meyer did not plan the flight just for the sake of it. 4 years ago, the rover sends a photo to Earth of the found stele, and he confesses that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that it's an information storage system that can be rewritten upon hearing these words. AI Irene activates and deciphers. The message on the stone is that it's a series of numbers at that time. The hesitant Jan leads to a mutiny. He doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about Zillion. But now the Americans have come to their aid, and their leader, as it turns out, concealed the true purpose of the flight. He is ready to switch sides with Goldstein, who is willing to do whatever it takes to combat his terminal illness. But Engineer Basil informs Meyer. He says that Komarov is the same kind of program as the stone they found, but the most crucial revelation is that he deciphered a copy of the black box from Zeta 1, which shows that the oxygen on the ship was cut off at the moment when that of the Americans struck Komarov. This means he was there. He also activated AI Irene. When he boards their ship after the conversation, Meyer shows Jean the photos they received 4 years ago from Mars, which, when encrypted, revealed Jean's face. This is why he brought her. On the expedition, the woman is disappointed Meyer played everyone. Suddenly, she sees herself in her father's house, where Komarov tells her that she is the link between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for 100,000 of years, and now he will prepare her to make a difficult decision. He provides coordinates on Mars, where Jean should go while on Earth. Scientists inform Goldstein that Komarov is the equivalent of a computer, and he himself is a biological machine. They are ready to transfer his brain into Komarov's body, but cannot guarantee the preservation of his personality. However, Goldstein is ready to take any risk to get rid of his terminal illness. Meanwhile, Zana leaves the ship despite Simon's protests. At this time, technicians Alan and Alice test the engine and discover that access to it is blocked. Irene suddenly begins responding with jokes, which are entirely uncharacteristic for a machine. It is revealed that she has reprogrammed herself, her interface and logic are changing, and she refuses to answer who or what made her do this. Engineer Basil realizes that the system is becoming like a brain. Irene confesses that she is evolving. In the meantime, Jean finds a small stone pyramid, and Simon forcibly makes Gemma accompany him in the search. Jean discovers his absence, and after contacting Simon, he receives an order not to let anyone inside. Just at that moment, American military personnel arrive, demanding that they hand over Komarov. Jan is willing to open the entrance, but the rest of the team opposes it. The mayor asks Basil to send a message to Goldstein, hoping that he may be more reasonable than his people. However, Irene has stopped communication with Earth. The engineer realizes that radical measures will have to be taken, but Jan still opens the doors, and the military personnel join Basil and begin to reboot Irene, just as the Americans find Komarov. But then the lights go out, and the astronaut disappears, while Jean, stumbling, falls from a hill. Regains consciousness but discovers that her leg is trapped between rocks, and she cannot free herself at that moment. An enraged military officer demands that the crew explain where Komarov went. He begins to beat people, demanding to summon the captain. A desperate Zana screams, Is it her destiny to die in a pit? On Mars, but she is found by Simon and Gemma. Alessandra notices an approaching storm. The military officer is preparing to leave the Ulysses ship, leaving the people in danger. She suddenly sees the lights start flashing, and the newly appeared Komarov asks to be taken back to Earth. Simon, Gemma, and Jean go together to the place indicated by Komarov, and find an entrance to an underground bunker similar to that. From there, the psychologist feels where to go and leads the couple. Soon they find real water, but this is not what Komarov wanted to show them while on Earth. Goldstein tells the nurse a story about the study of Mars. People were searching for green men, but it's all much simpler. He tells the story of the loyal dog. Hachiko compares Komarov to him, who was created by someone 100,000 years ago, and left for Mars, where he faithfully waited for his owner to do this. When the astronauts discover a wall composed of human bones one day at this time on Mars, they understand they are not the first people on this planet. It's not Earthlings colonizing Mars, it's the Martians who came to Earth, depleting the resources of the Red Planet. A tragedy unfolds on the Ulysses spaceship. Cowardly, Jan grabs a gun, intending to get on the American ship, at any cost to return to Earth and shoot Komarov. Jean immediately falls and is in excruciating pain, and Gemma flees. Alexandra tries to help Komarov, and Simon helps Jean, but the Russian Kosmina dies, and Jean stops breathing too. Then Simon removes his helmet and, surprised by the presence of air in the cave, performs artificial respiration on her. The girl regains consciousness. Gemma walks toward the Ulysses ship when she is informed of Komarov's death in the approaching storm. Meanwhile, Meyer secretly goes in search of his crew members, because the Americans refuse to take the billionaires team, and returns to Earth. At this moment of recovery, Jean sees the light in the bunker, guiding Simon to it after the astronauts see a figure as they emerge. Before them, in a spacesuit, and acknowledging Komarov, Meyer discovers access to the bunker, and makes contact alongside Simon and Jean as they head toward the light. He's struck by the existence of a Komarov in life, who abruptly informs them that everything folks ended here a long time ago. Realize that this is the North Pole of Mars, but how did they get here? Komarovs? Explains that this planet was once inhabited by a species that went extinct. Because it went astray, and that species were humans, a group of survivors settled in this place, but ended up killing each other when the available resources were exhausted. The remainder of them took off for Earth. Plato referred to them as Komarov, an Atlantean. Keeps on talking regarding his wait for thousands of years for Zana, who possesses traits like those of Martian and human AI. She alone is capable of rescuing humanity. She had to determine for herself whether people ought to have another chance at cutting the subject of the conversation. The armed forces officer planning to take them returns to Earth as a psychologist. The American aims his weapon at the cosmonauts, and Jean seeks help from Komarov. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for breath and falls. Returning to the ship, Simon orders them to prepare to depart, while Gemma from the Zillion ship tries to contact her associates, but none of them respond. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew heads to her ship, trying to establish contact with her, and informing her about the deaths of the military personnel, but she doesn't respond. That's when Myers starts speaking, recalling their past relationship, and confesses that he's no better than Goldstein, because he's willing to do anything to ensure his name remains in history, even betraying his team, but she's not like that. Won't be able to endure life in light of her people being ruined. All of a sudden, Gemma's voice is heard pleading with them to move quickly. Goldstein learned that Gemma has chosen to accept the Ulysses crew, has returned to Earth. They obstruct the Zeta-2's control panel. Before takeoff, the people on the ship prepare for their impending demise, and Jean asks Mars what she should do. Everything she sees and hears on the Red Planet flashes through her mind, and with sheer willpower, she removes control panels. Suddenly, an armed military officer appears in front of the ship. Intent on damaging the engines with his weapon, Simon is about to step out to stop the madman, but Jean beats him. She aims the weapon at the American. However, he lets him know that Mars will be the one to murder him. The army captain descends. The countdown to takeoff starts, and Jean understands there isn't any more time. She bids the crew farewell before leaving. Confessing her love for Simon, the ship takes off suddenly. Meyer notices that it's dark at the North Pole of Mars. This means that they couldn't have been there just a few minutes ago. They truly were at the North Pole of Mars, but in the distant past when the Red Planet was still suitable for life. At the same time, Goldstein is notified about the vessel's return, and his anger made him inconsolable, announcing his intention to visit Mars himself, and it is there that the Season 1 concludes here. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Take care and bye now.